Okay, so my name is Linda McCullough. I am the outreach coordinator for Ensight Skills Center, and I also work as a support coach in Ensight's Adapting to Low Vision program. And in working as a support coach, the question I hear most often is, how do I make my way in stores and other public places? People tell me they feel awkward and unsure of how to interact with clerks in the stores or the staff in doctors' offices. And they wonder how or whether to inform people that they have a vision impairment. So we've brought together three knowledgeable people who have experienced vision loss themselves and who have knowledge of self-advocacy to share, hoping to hear some of their insights and experiences. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves so that you can get to know them in their own words. So maybe we will start with Denny Moyer.
Okay, I'm Denny Moyer, and I am the CEO of the Ensight Skill Center. I'm also the founder, one of the founders of the Ensight Skill Center, and we provide low vision rehabilitation services, which include doctors of optometry, occupational therapists, orientational mobility services, coaching services, assistive technology, and our goal is simply to help people to either retain or remain as independent as they can, so that they can participate in their lives. The reason that I got started with the Ensight Skill Center is because I have Stargardt's disease, which is a juvenile onset type of macular degeneration. So it's my central vision that I struggle with. And I use all of the techniques and technology that is available to me.
How about you, Penn?
Yeah, I'm Penn Street, and I'm the Development and Outreach Director for Audio Information Network of Colorado. And we are a nonprofit. We've been around for over 30 years. We have 250 volunteers that read over 100 newspapers, and we broadcast the audio files across Colorado. You can listen to us on your phone. You can go onto the website and listen that way, or you can listen to the broadcast through your smart speakers. I also sit on the board of Ensight Skill Center, and I also facilitate Ensight Skill Center's low vision support group twice a month. And I lost my vision at 9 years old. I was bit by a rattlesnake, and the medication they gave me to save my life, which I'm thankful, triggered a syndrome called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, called SJS for short. And SJS affects all the soft tissue in your body. So of course your eyeballs are nothing but soft tissue. And so early on, my corneas were scarred, and then as I got older, just the scar tissue and everything just got worse and worse. My retinas have hemorrhaged, and I eventually lost my right eye. Gosh, it's been about 7-8 years ago. So I have a prosthetic, and in my left eye, I just have a little peripheral off on the side. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Michael.
Hi, Michael Stone. I never know like which part of my life I'm supposed to share. Professionally, I've had a long career developing, operating hotels and resorts. That changed dramatically when I found out that I was going to lose my vision to retinitis pigmentosa. Since then, I've been doing various things professionally, some of which has been owning a bike shop here in Boulder, Colorado, amongst other things. I've really spent a good portion of my time with advocacy. I'm on one of the commissions for advocacy for the state of Colorado for people with disabilities across the board. Also with the Boulder County Center for People with Disabilities. In addition to that, I sit on the board of directors for Ignite Adaptive Sports, and then a few others, including the Foundation Fighting Blindness. I've been struggling with my sight since I was about 5. When I was around 9, yeah, interestingly enough, it was a pivotal year. Unfortunately, they never really diagnosed it. I went undiagnosed until I was 35. I'm now 53, and have very little sight left. I could see light and dark, but no detail. And a lot of that's actually been in the last few years. But these days, my passion is really doing everything I can to connect with other people that are dealing with disabilities in general. But obviously, my heart is closer to the blindness community. I'm one of the coach. I'm on the coaching staff here at Ensight Skills, a group of extraordinary people, and thrilled to be here.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I'll just throw out a question, and whoever'd like to chime in, feel free. So what was it like for you to negotiate interactions in public when you were in the early stages of losing sight?
I'll go. When I was very young, I started losing my sight when I was 9. And as a kid, I really don't remember there being such like a transition, so to speak. There were things that I was told I couldn't do, like I couldn't pitch for my baseball team at school anymore, and I was really sad, and I didn't understand why. There were certain things that I was just told I couldn't do. But as I got older and my sight deteriorated, I was actually embarrassed, especially as a teenager. I really did not want to use a cane. I didn't want anybody to know I couldn't see the board or my textbooks and things like that. And I just really struggled. But as I got older and realized that it is way less cool running off the sidewalk because I refuse to use a cane than actually using the cane in the first place. um, and also just safety wise, I felt safer using a cane and then went on to use a guide dog. But it it is really hard. It's a hard transition, I think, from any life change, in particular. But I it's hard. It really is hard, and I feel like the best thing you can do is just start reaching out into your community, finding places like Insight Skills Center, talking to other people who've lost their sight. And that's what really helped me, is once I met other people that were either losing their sight or had lost their sight, that really helped me get that support that I needed.
What was it like to talk to people that, in the public that you didn't know that you encountered?
Oh, it it was hard. I mean, I think I still struggle with that. I mean, in my job, I have to walk into a room and be confident, and a lot of times, I have to walk up to the person that is hopefully going to write a check for whatever fundraiser I'm doing or sponsorship I need, and it's hard, and I don't think I am 100% comfortable still doing that. But I know I have to,
Mhm.
because again, I really realize, like, it's less embarrassing to just say, "Hey, is Joe Smith in the room?" And versus not being able to do my job, or kind of stumbling over trying to find other ways of doing it. I just really feel like my voice is the number one tool that I have, and
Mhm.
it's up to me to be able to use it.
Mhm.
And I would agree with Penn. I think in the beginning it was very embarrassing. You didn't want to tell people that you couldn't see. They pull out their phones and oh, look at this picture of my kid or my dog, or on Facebook, and you're shaking your head, or and you just don't want to have to say it over and over and over again. And in my case, I guess the hardest, I think it's still hard for me to hear this, and I don't know why, but I started losing my vision as a teenager, and it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I lost my driver's license. So I had a long period of time there of adjustment, which I had to do on my own. But every time you tell somebody that you can't see something, you know, I was in college, those kinds of things. Well, you don't look like you're a blind person, which made me feel like they didn't believe me. It's like, what does a blind person look like? You know, because I don't have, you know, black glasses on, or, you know, I wasn't using a white cane at the time. And I really felt like Penn was saying, it is difficult. You don't want to walk into a room and your first introduction to a group of people is tripping over a chair, you know, hitting the floor. Do I look like a blind person now? You want people to have an understanding, yet I don't know if it's that they don't always want to understand, or they're so visual that based on their vision, you must not be visually impaired. So it was hard in the very beginning. Now, of course, you know, we're all in the business, so it is our business to make sure people know. But it was difficult. It was really hard. It was embarrassing. You know, young people, they want to be like everybody else.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, it's all these things it's a constant revolution, right? Every time, every day you go out, you're going to find something that is going to challenge some aspect of something that might make us self-conscious, and in the end bring out what we fear most. You know, Denny, I hear you don't look blind, I don't know, 30, 40 times a day. I'm very, I mean, it's incredible. And I do have a cane. I have a dog that says guide dog right on it. It's this and so forth. And, you know, and those of us who have had sight and lost our sight, we've learned how to compensate very, very well, which means that we exist with two identities. You know, I have this little affectionate thing I do with my guide dog. I say, you know, I refer to her as, I'm your blind guy, you know, and you know, like she knows what that means somehow. And but she gets all excited. I'm constantly being challenged on what I can and can't do, what I can and can't see, and so forth. And then I think about what it's like from their position, because I did have sight for a decent amount of time. It was never, I never had good sight. I mean, I've been legally blind since I was single digits, but I certainly didn't know that it was progressive until much later in life. It's and every new situation, I have this little degree of fear. I'm not exactly always sure what it is that I'm afraid of. Being judged, being vulnerable, all the above. You know, I think we're taught to be independent and do everything ourselves, and with many things, it's a great amount of frustration. A pivotal moment for me was, you know, because I had learned very well to compensate, which is one of the reasons that I don't look blind. And I was going to take the bus, and I couldn't. It didn't occur to me that at this particular bus stop that there would be 3 or 4 choices for buses. All right, but the bus arrived. I could see this massive thing in front of me, but I couldn't read the sign. And I asked, "Is this the skip bus?" This was here in Colorado, and the bus driver says, "Well, that's what the sign says." I said, "Yeah, well, thank you. I have a difficulty seeing signs." And then I promptly walked up the stairs, and she said, "Well, you didn't have any problem with those stairs." And I said, "Well, one is visual and one is motor memory." And here I am defending myself to a bus driver. I have a bus pass. I've paid for my bus pass. There is no reason to have challenged me in that capacity. But that left me with my heart very, very low. And at the time, I actually went to a low vision specialist, and they handed me a cane. And I said, I don't need this. I'm an Ironman triathlete. I can put one foot in front of the other and go. And they said, "Yeah, but they don't know that. You have to, this is how you identify yourself when you ask for help." And it occurred to me that, so I looked at it, and that's how I transitioned. I called it an identification cane, until I needed one to actually, as Penn said, not fall off the sidewalks. And I decided that was worse falling and knocking things around the tables and everything else.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you all sharing how it has been, what you experience when you're out and about. And I wonder what techniques or communication skills you found that are helpful, and what helped you develop those skills.
Well, I think,
I
oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead. I'm
Michael.
sorry. No,
No,
I was good. No, I was gonna say, when, communication, when people ask me how many fingers they're holding up, I like to show them my middle finger, just to say one. That's how I've learned to communicate. No, complete. Penn, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, well, but just what Michael said, but now I can't say that. But,
You can actually.
um, but using like, I really did. I really fought to use a white cane, and didn't for so long. But the pivotal point for me using the white cane was I was actually hired to teach blind students how to rock climb, and I knew my area in the Rocky Mountain National Park, that I would, teach and train. But we flew down to Arkansas, to a climbing ranch down there, and I was meeting these students from Louisiana that I'd never met before. And the first morning, one of the guides who didn't know me said, "Oh, Penn, meet us at blah blah, rock." And I was like, okay. And I had been up there the evening before, so I knew the route. But one of the teachers said, "Oh, I have a map here, Penn. You're going the wrong way." And I just, okay, she has the map. She's sighted. I'm not. So we went off, and I knew we were going wrong. Like I knew we were going wrong, because it was like a 5-minute hike to the rock face, where it was like half an hour later, and I finally said, we need to go back to square one. And we missed some sort of trail, so let's go back so we went back to the ranch. And then I said, everybody follow me. And we went up to the rock face. We got up there in 5 minutes, and all of the students were blind, so they had no clue. They thought it was an hour to get to this rock face. And I got up there, and the other guides were like, "Oh my gosh, we almost, set out the posse for you," or whatever. But, and I told them it was my error, that I had put my trust in this other person, where I should have taken it on my own. And then it was kind of funny afterwards, because then when we all went back to the ranch afterwards, it was a 5-minute walk. And my students were like, "Why did it take so long to get here this morning?" But it really showed me that and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was me, because I didn't have a cane. I didn't tell them that I couldn't see, and that I had the system of how I navigated the trails. And they needed to let me do that, because I knew what I was doing if we went that route. And after that is when I really pulled out my cane, and I never left the house again without it. Because if I could get lost in the woods with a sighted person guiding me, it was not safe for me to go from here to the bus stop without a cane. And so you can't really blame other people for treating us like we can't see, when we don't. And I still, it's a mystery to me. I don't know what blind people look like, but obviously not the three of us. And it's really, I mean, besides wearing a big button or a shirt that says you can't see, but if you have a cane or you have a dog, again, that's not 100%. I get it all the time. "Oh, you're a dog trainer. That's so neat. How long have you been training him?" It doesn't enter their head that I'm the one, it's my dog. I'm not, but it's all about communication. You have to use your voice. You have to figure out a way to be confident enough that this is who I am now, and this is part of who I am now. And just like, I have brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm 5'9". It's like, this is just part of, pieces of me now. And but you do have to have the confidence. But I do, you know, you have to have support. You have to have, you know, you have to get those skills before you can. They don't just come to you overnight.
It's true. And I agree with both of them that we need our canes as an identification tool. We all have dogs. My dog wears a sign that says, please don't pet me, I'm working. And people think the same thing, that I'm training him.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I learned after all of these years is patience. And to see this, because it did upset me. I've had the same experiences that both of them have been talking about, that people don't believe you, they challenge you. And now I consider that an opportunity. This is the chance that I have to explain about vision loss. You know, as the CEO of the Ensight Skills Center, it also gives me an opportunity to talk about Ensight, but mostly it gives me an opportunity to educate my community or whomever I'm speaking with about vision loss and what that, what it's like and what it means that not everybody who is visually impaired or who is called blind is 100% blackout blind. That we, you know, can still see some, in some cases, you know, we have tools, there's ways for us to be able to get around. And so when it comes to being able to communicate with people, to me, patience and thinking of it as an opportunity for education has really, it has helped me. It has given me some comfort in being able to do that, not just get right away upset about it.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that I have, because I'm in a position where I'm constantly having to educate, and somewhat to Denny's point, I want to educate. There are some people in the world that don't want to be educated. You have to know sometimes the time to do this and time to pull back, and then there's a time sometimes to you know, and that's where really this self advocacy really does come in. You know, like everything, it has to be a process. I'm an avid runner, and I've been running on the trails by my house now for, you know, well over 2 decades. And when I realized that I couldn't see anyone in the trail anymore, but I was able to stay on the trail. I knew the trail well enough. I wasn't even sure how I was doing it, but I was able to do that. It wasn't, impossible. Although until I got bit by a rattlesnake, that had its own little story. But so I decided, because of exactly what Denny was saying, is that, well, I'm not in darkness. I felt like it was offensive for me to call myself blind. So I wore a shirt that said visually impaired. And people started to stop me and say, well, what does that mean? It means that I can't see you, but I can see the sun is out. I could see enough of that. They're like, well, it really doesn't tell me anything. I said, well, you know, there's various degrees of blind. And it was, you know, I was struggling with this. And I remember telling this to a friend and another affiliate to Ensight, Dan Berlin. And he said, you know, the way I see it is, you know, blind is blind. You know, the National Federation for the Blind and various other support organizations don't necessarily differentiate. It's really what you identify with. And then I started to think about it. I'm like, well, I think the problem wasn't necessarily what I was trying to communicate. It was that I wasn't ready to call myself blind yet. I was visually impaired. And you hear it often. You know, something for the, you know, I use audio descriptions when I listen to movies, and it'll tell you when you turn it on, this is meant for people who are blind and visually impaired. They make both. They don't just say one or the other. And so it is interesting to see that. Now I wear a shirt and I make it as visible as possible. I wear a high vis that says blind, and I always either have a human with me or a dog. And I just find people don't read it.
Yeah.
So that's its own story.
Yeah.
So even with the signs and symbols, the canes, the shirt, people aren't getting it, but you're also bringing in your voice. Still,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, and if I have the opportunity, I try to find as kind of a voice as I can, because let's face it, people's attention are all over the place, and and a lot of times if they challenge me, and I'll just ask them like, well, let me ask you, what more can I do? And I'll point to the shirt, or to the cane, or to the dog. And I said, how would this work better for you? Because I can't see you. And some people, if they're kind enough, will be like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. They're like, I must be blind. They're like, I never saw your shirt, and amongst other things. And I don't know, I have a friend who has a daughter with a vision impairment, and sometimes he says, well, you just can't fix stupid, can you? There is something to be said for that.
Yeah.
And I have to say that sometimes under my breath, just so I could have a little bit of humor. Yeah, but then again, I also take a moment to think back to the days when I didn't identify with being blind, and I wonder what I missed in the world. Maybe I was that person who walked right past somebody like that. I'd like to think I wasn't, but did I pay attention to curb cuts? Did how was it? Did I rush stop signs and stoplights and all the other things associated with it? So I think that's where, like, to what Denny was saying, it's good to educate when you can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes like when I'm just tired and or I don't feel well, or I I do get tired sometimes of being the advocate or being the symbol of the nice blind person. But I still try to be a good human being. So even if I'm not feeling like educating, the cashier at the grocery store about, I can't see the buttons on the checkout screen, but I still remind myself that I'm a human and that all of us should do our best when we're out there, regardless if you have a vision issue or not, to be a decent human being when you're in public. But it does get tiring sometimes.
You just made a great point, Penn. The world has changed so much. It used to be that you could go somewhere and you could order your food, or you can do whatever you can, and you'd hand somebody a credit card, and that was it. Yeah. Nowadays, they literally will flip the screen around, and maybe even walk away. I mean, I've had some extremely challenging moments on this, and now we're faced to have to advocate for ourselves on a moment to moment basis, where and it does get exhausting. I mean, that fatigue, I think, that you're talking about, sometimes it's because of having to educate. I feel that level of fatigue. Years ago, I had a friend who I was just exhausted from having the menus read to me. I just didn't want it. And he said, dude, just go to a Thai restaurant and order chicken pad Thai. It's on there in this, or veggie pad Thai for you, Penn. But and it made me laugh, because I started to realize that's what I would do. I would go choose places that I didn't have to do that little extra work, and I could just kind of slip into the oblivion a little bit and just be me.
Yeah. Or I tend to, especially if I'm going to someplace new, especially a restaurant, I will do my best to look it up ahead of time, look up the menu ahead of time. So at least I have a basic idea, because then when I get there, it's like, oh, I heard they have great, veggie pad Thai. So you kind of, because it takes away that sort of, you just want to be a normal person, which I hate that word, but sometimes you do, you just you just want to walk into a restaurant and go, hey, this is what I want, without having somebody to read the whole menu.
I think one of the best things that came out of COVID was them putting those scan codes on the tables. So that I can just put my phone over it. And I don't always know if it opens right away or not. Usually Dan will say, okay, it opened. And then I can use all of my accessibility options on the phone to read a menu. Instead of trying to use magnification or take a picture of the page and then enlarge it. Not that I think anything really good came out of COVID, but I wish they would just continue that, because I really appreciate being able to do that and reading the menu myself.
Yeah, and you can read it yourself, just like everybody else is doing. Everybody at the table is taking a picture of that. So it's inclusive. I mean, I think actually there have been some really good things that came out of COVID, like people getting to work remotely. You know, when you have a disability on any level, it's a lot of freaking effort to get from point A to point B when you have to travel, you know, to a different town, a different city every, you know, Monday through Friday. And so, and I've heard it over and over in the disability community that they love being able to work from home because everything's right there, you know, and it's a 1-minute commute versus sometimes an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I do think there was some positive things that came out of COVID.
Yeah, I think, you know, I know this isn't our topic, and I do think that you're right, that it is nice that so many of us can work from home more, but I also feel like it has isolated too many people. And they've lost skills, and then they're worried about getting back on a bus because they haven't done it in a year. And it has taken a little bit of our independence away because of that, but that's a whole nother, you'll probably have to edit all this out. Sorry.
That could be its own I think that could be its own panel, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know.
It could.
Right.
Well, I'm curious, like, given the challenges of interacting with the public and all the things you've learned over time, how is your experience different now from how it might have been 5 or 10 years ago in being out there and being able to negotiate your way and talk with folks?
I know with me, and I guess it just comes with age, no matter who you are, with whatever situation is in front of you, is I really do pick my battles now. Where before, if like, especially with a guide dog, you know, if they didn't want me to come in or they put me back by the bathroom, you know, or whatever, I mean, every time I would, you know, I would go off the ADA and but now it's I think I'm more patient, and I definitely give myself more time. And that's okay, where I don't race to the bus stop, you know. I make sure I have 10 minutes to just sit there if I need to be. But I definitely, I really feel like I do pick what I advocate versus feeling like I have to advocate everything.
Mhm.
I guess I feel like after all of these years, and it's been many, the fear is gone. Yes, like everybody, I get aggravated about, you know, those same questions over and over again, like, well, how much can you see? Can you see my face? Or blah, blah, blah. But, you know, again, it has given me more patience, and I don't have that fear anymore. You know what? If you can't tell that I'm a visually impaired person, how does that impact my life? It doesn't at all. So I don't really need to worry about how they feel about me anymore. I just, you know, I'm okay with who I am. And if you're not okay with me, that's really on you. That shouldn't impact my life. And so that's, I think, where that fear came from, people judging you. And like Mike was talking about, you know, walking up the stairs on the bus. even with the dog, you feel like if you don't trip, nobody's going to believe that you're visually impaired. But who cares? What are they going to do? You know, they're going to kick you off the bus. So I think that's the thing that has changed the most for me, is that I'm more confident in myself, and that fear just really doesn't exist anymore.
These days, I think I'm more tuned into what it is that I'm afraid of. When I get that feeling, and I always feel it in my body first. It's something like I realize I'm holding my breath, or my heart rate starts increasing. Feelings of anxiety. I literally will pause and ask myself what I'm afraid of. In the old days, I just I sat there with my hands gripped and tense, and I'm sure I still do it to some degree. But a lot of times, and for those people anybody who's listening to this that had vision and lost it, versus being born without something, it's two different experiences. Is really, it's just a reminder of that loss, that this is something I used to be able to do, no problem, and nowadays, and so really, what is it that I'm afraid of? Well, either more loss or missing, as they say, the old days. And nowadays, I've really grown to realize that that's kind of a choice, an attitude choice, and kind of like what Penn was saying about picking battles, but it's also the battles within ourselves. And for me, when I'm just feeling that way and really kind of being tuned into it, I've also learned that I kind of like the place that I'm in right now, and that too is a choice. I mean, here I am with 3 extraordinary people on a call right now. Well, if I didn't have this condition, I wouldn't know what your guys' experience is. I wouldn't be in a place to do this. I'd be going off just like everyone else. I mean, as we don't like to use that word, but the normal. Whereas obviously it's kind of a story we tell, because everybody's dealing with something, and nowadays it's like, wait a second, this is actually kind of cool, and I get to continuously learn something new from other people that either have been there before it or have a different attitude towards it, and then I get to apply it and like, oh my God, this actually works, and I kind of like that. Well, in the early days, I didn't even have the wherewithal to ask myself that question. I just was kind of riddled with fear and confusion, and how do I do this? How do I do that? And even though we know there's people, I mean, even before technology is where it is today, people are able to do it, and go on off and do extraordinary things, and even what we call ordinary things, working in the kitchen, for example, which, all those little tasks that everybody forgets about. Like, okay, I remember the first time that I missed the toothbrush by putting toothpaste on it, and it got everywhere. And I actually felt horrible. I mean, well, there was nobody around there. There was nobody to be embarrassed from. I was by myself. But yeah, that's exactly what I felt. And then, well, I'm like, you know what, Michael, you're not the first person to have to go through this. Let's figure out how other people do it. And then you realize, if you apply that attitude towards pretty much everything, realize that you're going to have rough moments, but they're just moments.
Yeah.
I appreciate hearing your insights and wisdom. I've got sort of a general question and a specific part of it. Like, what would your advice, what would you suggest to somebody just maybe recently diagnosed, or just finding themselves having more difficulty in public, not being able to do those transactions in a store as easily? What are some concrete pieces of advice you'd have for that person?
Breathe. Take a deep breath. It's amazing how much better you feel if you just remember to breathe. We as humans, I think, tend to like Michael said, like realize you're not breathing, or your heart rate's going up, and that it's everything's not going to be easy, and it's going to be hard. I would recommend, if you have either a spouse or a partner, a friend, a good friend, do some test runs with them first. Don't go to the grocery store by yourself for the first time.
Mhm.
Take somebody if you can. If you can't, then that's a different situation. But it's okay to ask your friends and family to, hey, I want to go take this bus route. Would you mind going with me the first time? Or you know, and definitely there's so many that I mean, I tell the young whippersnappers now, you guys are so lucky that you have so many resources and services and tools out there at literally at your fingertips. Use them, take advantage of them. Insight Skill Center wasn't around when I was a teenager, or even in college. And it's there's so much out there that you can take advantage of. And a lot of it is either free or low cost. Um, and that it's okay to ask for help. If you're looking for a specific kind of olives in the grocery store and you can't find them, ask, some stranger walking by, it's like, hey, I can't see so well. I'm looking for this olive. Can you help me? 99.9% of the time, you're going to make that person's day, because they're going to feel so special that they got to help the blind lady in the grocery store. And they're going to go home and tell their family and friends that they got to help the blind lady in a positive way. So,
The blind lady.
So
The
you're
blind
talking
lady.
about some tools and some training, maybe some digital identifying tools
Well,
and training as well as asking for help.
I think
Yeah.
there's a
asking
step.
for help. There's a national flyer that's going around now that a lot of agencies across the country and in Canada are starting to use. And it simply says, if you can't see something, say something.
Yeah.
Really, that's all it takes. Ask for help. Make sure your doctor understands. Too many people let their doctors off the hook. You need to say something. They need to know about community resources as well as anybody else. But again, if you can't see something, say something.
Yeah.
I think it's really is simple.
I think if to that person, I mean, that's newly diagnosed and doing everything for the first time, and it would be first to remind yourself that this is a first time, and you're allowed to go on out and flail around, and I like the baby steps approach to many things. It's funny, with Penn's story about making someone's day. So I notoriously, when I'm picking out strawberries, pick out the bad ones, just because I just grab a thing. I'm like, and I get home, I'm all excited to eat my strawberries or raspberries. I mean, I like my berries. It's my happy place. And then nothing's worse than biting into one and it not being great. Well, okay, well, now I've got a fear of that. Well, how about asking somebody who's around? Hey, will you do me a favor? Or how do these look? And that person's like, actually, that's not a good one. Let me find you a good one. And I said, thank you so much. And then moved on. And now I'm feeling good about that. And you just kind of you move through life that way. And but not, being afraid to ask for help is like no one. I don't care who you are, at some point in your life, you're going to need help. I don't care whether or not your eyes are perfect or not. As they say, no one gets through this life unscathed. And now we're knowing what we're dealing with it. And it's funny, but it's, and all those resources, literally, I mean, I have friends that, they go to the same grocery store, they walk in, they go right to the customer service area and says, will you help me shop? Right from the beginning. They've got their cart, they've got their thing, and the person takes them from place to place. And if they're trained well, they'll learn how to ask the right questions, or somebody might even say, how best can I help you? But the truth is I think it's always great to take baby steps. And then once you're add something to your list, a little bit out of your comfort zone, and starting with things that are both that you need, but also things that are fun. You know, I remembered just like, okay, well, I am going to go to a restaurant by myself without anybody there, and I'm going to figure this out. And I worked through the scenario in my head, much like you guys were saying with doing a little bit of homework beforehand and trying to pull up the menu online. I do have some people that I've talked through my Insight world that aren't using computers. They're older adults that their technology is not, technology in itself is terrifying for them. And you know, they're just, the idea of flailing around on a computer screen is actually more scary than anything else. And like many things in life, it's just that I think if you add in one more thing outside of your comfort zone, even just little stretches, you know, going for a walk, for example, or whatever it might be. But I think that's just where, you know, the other thing I'd say to somebody newly diagnosed is like, listen, you're not the first person to have to go through this. This is new to you. And seek out those people that can help you. And it may not always be the right people. There are people out there that it really, I mean, they do a lot of tough love, and you may not be in a place right now for tough love. You know, at some point there is a time and a place for it, but that's for you to decide. And you know.
Okay, getting a little more specific, what would you say to someone who's going to attend an event or a party, you know, and they may not know people? How could they prepare ahead of time, or could they? And how could you break the ice? How do you deal with the snack table? One of the questions I get. So what are your thoughts?
Again, if you can take somebody, that's fantastic. You can't always do that. But if you can take a friend or a family member, and that's just not somebody who's blind or visually impaired. I think a lot of people are nervous about going to a new setting with people they don't know. It's not, that has nothing to do with you being visually impaired. It's funny with the snack thing is I usually don't eat at things like that. Like I have not, I've had people like, oh, do you want me to get you a plate? But because it kind of depends on what it is, but usually I'll say, oh no, I'm fine, I just ate or whatever. So I always usually eat before those things, just because it's still nerve-wracking to me. You know, and you know, I don't know if there's a right answer for that.
No one right answer, I'm sure.
No. And then, I mean, if you can go ahead of time, like, you know, like I'm going to be at a big convention this upcoming weekend, and I'm purposely going to be going down a few hours early so that I can go into the room and I know where the stage is going to be. I'm going to know where I'm going to sit. You know, so that I feel comfortable, and I try to always do that when I can, is to go ahead of time and kind of get the lay of the land. And that's not always an option, but if you can, that's great. But again, it's, you just use your voice, you know, what is the saying? If you can't see, say something. That's, you know, it is nerve-wracking, but I don't think it's necessarily just because you can't see.
No, it's funny. The scenario you gave, Linda, is actually one that and much like Penn, it still terrifies me. Believe it or not, going to a friend's house or someone's home where there's some there's some buffet or whatever it is amongst the scariest things I do. Honestly, I usually pick out a place in the room and stay there. And when that when that person comes and wants to take make a plate for me, it also depends on where I'm at that particular day. But I really don't like that feeling. It's more than just uncomfortable too. It's because in buffets, for me, it's when you're that's one, and it's important. So as you progress in vision impairment, we use our hands a lot more. We got to touch things, and I've made my share of mistakes of where I put my hand, and you take that any way you want, but those buffet type scenarios. And let me tell you, I was at a funeral last weekend, and it was a memorial, and I was there without my dog. I had my cane, and I literally stood in the back and didn't move. And I knew what scared me the most about this was that the majority of the people there knew me and I didn't know them. And which is, to another point, when, Linda, when you're asking those questions, if the people in the room are going to be familiar to you, but they're not used to you as a blind person, and they're a lot of them are afraid they're going to say something offensive, and they usually do. But but the hardest thing is when they don't announce themselves. I mean, it's particularly interesting. I sit on all these disability boards, and I think only one of them will actually announce who's speaking. It does, when you're using these Zoom things, you actually have to usually hit something so you know who the person is that's speaking. And some people like to think it's funny to use little funny screen names. There's a woman on one of the boards that I'm on. And Denny and I will find this both offensive, but her screen name was Detroit's Best Pizza. As two Chicagoans here, that's just
there is no such thing.
Yeah, I actually wanted to turn off my screen reader every time she spoke. But I do think it's important, but in the end, the best advice is the one that Penn gave: just breathe. And if you don't know how to breathe, learn. And because it sounds funny, but most of us don't necessarily know that there is a right way to breathe. And you could really make or break your experience right then and there. Probably some of the best advice you'll ever get tonight are those two words that Penn said.
So taking some deep breaths.
Yeah. Smell the roses, blow out the candles. That's how I remember it.
Well, any final thoughts?
Well, go ahead, Denny.
The only thing I was going to say was we didn't talk a lot about the different resources, and because I work mostly with seniors, I would tell anybody with anything, any kind of disability, that probably their best resource in their community is to contact their area agency on aging, because they do have all of the local resources. And, I really think it's important for people to know that. I don't think people do. And they will send you in the right direction. And even if the first phone call that you make isn't the right one, because those of us who are out in the communities, those who are on these boards, we know about the different resources, and we are meeting with them. We're at the conventions, we're at the seminars, we're at all of the fairs when they were happening. And so we know about each other. So at least if you make contact like that with an area agency on aging, and I get that that doesn't include everybody, but you know, in the case of the older adult over the age of 40, 45, that's going to be one of the best places for them to go to find out about resources. And, you know, of course, there are other resources for people who are younger, whether they're in college or they contact the state. But the thing about the younger population is, and Michael already mentioned this, the younger people are very quick to get on their computers and look up resources, very quick. You know, when I'm feeling bad, you know, something's going on physically with me, the first thing I do is start looking up symptoms, right? We probably go with too much information to the doctors. Or, look, let me do my job. But the younger population is more likely to do that. The older population is not, because as he said, they don't want anything to do with it. And often by the time they're reaching out for help, they've lost enough vision that their computer at that point is useless to them. They can't really see it anymore. So we are, you know, I'm a baby boomer and we're used to technology. So as I get older, I expect I'll continue to use technology, but the people that I'm serving right now who are in their 80s and 90s didn't grow up with that. And so that's not their first go-to. So they need to know that there is a place in every community that they can contact. Who knows most of the resources if those agencies have done their job.
Yeah.
I heard something, it was on some show that I was listening to the other day, and the topic was, if you could say 3 words to your 18-year-old self, you know, in this case, and, you know, what would it be? And I don't know, and of course it was very difficult for any of the people that were asking themselves that question, what to do. And so there's lots of ways to say this, and there's probably iterations, but one is to believe in yourself, and also, you know, or with an dot, or think for yourself, and to realize that for many of whether or not it's a social setting or not, these are they're fixable problems. But if you can't tell that to yourself, it's going to be a lot more challenging as you move forward. You know, there a lot of times there isn't another option other than that attitude that we have to have in that moment. And for me, that's the most pivotal thing. All of Denny has literally, every time I speak with her, she's got a new solution she's got 15 solutions to every problem I have. And, you know, with using technology or who to call or whatever, it's actually an incredible amount of information. And sometimes, you know, like, I dropped a screw on the floor. The only way I'm going to find it is that I'm aware of is to get on my hands and knees. Well, not everybody can do that, right? And of course, we're afraid later that we're going to step on that screw, and that's where a lot of things are. And I think it's very, very important to remember that when we're struggling with a lot of these things, it's a reminder of our loss. And if we're living by ourselves and we're home alone, and we're now in a place that's something that may seem so insignificant, whether or not it's missing the toothbrush or that screw or blueberry on the floor or whatever it is, a coffee bean, it's kind of a reminder of a bigger problem. And that last part is sometimes is the hardest one. And that's a different kind of help that you have to ask for. There are some wonderful resources out there that can help us through the emotional challenges, because most of these things that come up really do fall under that heading. And a lot of times we're so traumatized by our loss, we're not ready yet to hear about all the great resources out there. And even though we need that, we'd absolutely need that. And so, and that's where this becomes really important. But my guess is that same resource that Denny mentioned about the agencies for people who are aging may actually have that resource as well to get that level of help.
Well, if
It
there's
got real
no
quiet.
other comments or thoughts, we can wrap up here. I really appreciate all the insights and the information and experiences that you've shared. I think it's educated me and will be helpful to others. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for asking
Thanks.
us, Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.
Mhm.
That's